Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. The shattered starfield of Clithera 9 stretched out like a ruined canvas, its fragments of stone and metal drifting like the bones of forgotten gods. Wrecked warships, once invincible machines, hung suspended in the void, their scorched hulls long cooled, reflecting the faint light of distant stars. The cosmic wind, an invisible tide of radiation, whistled through the debris, carrying whispers of broken oaths and curses yet to fade. At the heart of this decay, a small escape pod, its hull scarred like the skin of a survivor, drifted silently, a lost soul adrift in the emptiness. Inside, Kalia Vren, warrior of the Solari, lay slumped on the cold metal floor, her breath shallow, flickering like a flame on the verge of extinction. Her skin, once shimmering with the silver glow of Solari elites, was now ashen, streaked with dried blood and stardust, as if the universe itself had drained her life away. Her armor, etched with the flowing sigils of the Galactic Council, curving lines like rivers of stars, was reduced to shattered fragments clinging to her body, like promises crumbling in the cold wind. Energy shackles around her wrists pulsed faintly, emitting a ghostly green glow, a mark of a merciless verdict, eternal exile, no appeal, no hope of return. Kalia had been abandoned here, amidst the starfield, not to live, but to dissolve into the darkness, to become a speck of dust in the graveyard of stars. She no longer knew how long it had been since the Council's judgment. Weeks, perhaps months. Time here had no shape, only the crushing silence and the cold seeping into her bones. Kalia had once been a commander, a brilliant strategist, leading Solari fleets through brutal battles against the Zero's alliance, a ruthless force bent on erasing any civilization that refused to kneel. She had stood on the bridge of her flagship, eyes like steel, ordering war machines to tear the skies apart. But at the Tikra belt, she made a choice that turned the galaxy against her. She ordered a retreat, refusing to incinerate a human colony where thousands of civilians, strangers' faces, pleading eyes, hid in the shadows. The Council called it treason, an unforgivable stain. She called it conscience, though it had torn her heart in two. Conscience hadn't saved her. The escape pod, its communication systems disabled, drifted like a dead leaf in a cosmic storm. Water had run dry long ago, leaving only a few drops in rusted conduits. Food was reduced to a handful of nutrient powder packets, bitter as ash on her tongue. Kalia lay there, eyes closed, her long, burnt copper hair tangled around her angular face, its sharp features softened by the approach of death. She had no strength to stand, no will to fight the darkness. Memories of Tikra flooded back, pillars of smoke rising, children's cries in the night, and the eyes of her warriors, half admiring, half scorning, as she ordered the ceasefire. She had saved them, but lost everything. She whispered, her voice faint, blending with the hiss of the cosmic wind. If this is the price, so be it. But deep in her chest, a tiny spark, fragile as a distant star, refused to die. She didn't know if it was hope or merely the stubbornness of a warrior who wouldn't yield. Then, a sound clang, sharp and metallic, striking the pod's hull. It cut through the silence like a blade, making her heart lurch, if only for a weak beat. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy, as light from a distant star pierced the cracked viewport, illuminating a figure. Not Solari, with their lithe forms and shimmering skin. Not Zeros, with their angular features and deadly gazes. It was a human, the species she had fought to protect, and the same species that had cast her into this abyss. He wore a patched-up spacesuit, its rough stitches like the story of a wanderer. His clear helmet revealed a rugged face, stubbled, with a long scar running across his temple, a reminder of battles past. His eyes were sharp, but not the cold sharpness of a predator. They held the resolve of someone who had seen too much death and still chose to keep going, still found a reason to live. He moved swiftly, efficiently, as if the darkness of the starfield was his home, each step a familiar rhythm. A handheld scanner beeped faintly, its green light sweeping over the pod, pausing where Kalia lay, like an invisible finger touching her fate. Still alive? He muttered, his low voice crackling through the comms, tinged with surprise but not pity. He knelt, inspecting the energy shackles on her wrists, his gaze focused, unflinching. Solari tech. High grade, but locked tight. Someone really wanted you to die slow. His tone held no mockery, just the cool observation of an engineer assessing a broken machine. He didn't wait for a response, perhaps knowing she had no strength to give one. From his belt he drew a small tool, its plasma tip flaring like a tiny star, slicing through the shackles in seconds. The hiss of released energy echoed sharp, pulling Kalia from the haze of death. She groaned, not from pain, but from the shock of feeling freedom, even if just a fragment, like the first breath after drowning. He looked up, his eyes locking onto hers, not to judge, but to confirm she was still there, still fighting. "Hang on," he said, his voice low but firm, like an unspoken vow. "I'm getting you out of here." He lifted her, gentle yet strong, as if he'd done this 100 times, as if saving lost souls was how he defined himself. His name was Ethan Caldwell, but Kalia didn't know that yet. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask why she'd been left in that metal coffin drifting through Clithera 9's starfield. He simply acted, as if saving a lost soul was the most natural thing in the universe. An auto-syringe pressed against her neck, its cold steel piercing her ashen skin, flooding her veins with stimulants like a river of fire, dragging her back from the edge of darkness. She groaned, not from pain, but from the strange sensation of her body being forced to live again, her heart pounding harder though her will still wanted to let go. "Don't try to talk," he said, his voice low, both a command and a comfort. "You're dehydrated, malnourished, and I'd bet on a few broken bones. I'm getting you out of here." He lifted her, gentle but sure, as if her body, a Solari warrior's frame, was just another piece of wreckage in the cosmic ruin he knew so well. When Kalia opened her eyes again, the icy chill of the escape pod was gone, replaced by the faint warmth of a small scout ship's cabin. She lay on a fold-out cot, its thin mattress creaking with every move. The cabin was cramped but meticulously maintained, as if its owner refused to let the chaos of the universe seep inside. Green light flickered from the control panel, illuminating scattered tools, a rusted wrench, a coil of energy wire, a broken sensor dangling from a hook. On the wall, an old, faded photograph hung crookedly, a woman with a gentle smile and a child, her eyes bright as tiny stars, both frozen in a moment stolen by time. Kalia tried to sit up, but a flare of pain in her chest erupted like fire, forcing a hiss through her gritted teeth, her breaths ragged. "Easy." Ethan's voice came from the cabin's corner, low and calm, the tone of someone used to moments like this. He sat on a swivel chair, one leg propped on a metal crate, holding a scratched data pad, its screen casting light across his angular face. The scar on his temple wrinkled as he frowned, his eyes sharp but not lifeless. They held the weight of someone who'd seen too much loss but still found a reason to keep going. 3 broken ribs and signs of infection," he said, not looking up from the pad. "The meds are working, but you need rest. Don't try to play hero." Kalia studied him, her silver eyes sharp despite her weakened state, like a blade still gleaming though notched. "Why?" Her voice was hoarse, like stone grinding against stone, each word costing a painful breath. "Why save me?" Ethan shrugged, the motion almost casual, but his eyes stayed on her. "Because I saw you. Because I could." He set the data pad down, leaning forward, his gaze locking onto hers, as if reading an unwritten story. "And because I know what it's like to be left behind." His words carried no pity, only a simple truth, as if he and Kalia shared an invisible scar they both understood. Silence settled over the cabin, heavy but not oppressive, like the moment before a storm. Kalia watched him, her eyes tracing every detail, the patched-up spacesuit, the calloused hands, and then pausing at a patch on his sleeve, near his wrist. A faint symbol, unmistakable, the mark of the Zero's alliance, not the crest of a warrior, but of a support engineer, one who stood behind the killing machines, the unbreakable shields, the weapons that turned cities to ash. Her stomach twisted, memories of Tikara, smoke rising, screams swallowed by plasma fire, surging like a wave. She clenched her fist, nails digging into her palm, but said nothing. Not yet. Ethan stood, crossing to a dispenser on the wall, the hiss of the system echoing as a cup of recycled water slid out. He set it before her, the water shimmering under the dim light, carrying a faint metallic tang. Drink, he said, not commanding, but leaving no room for refusal. If you want to live, your body needs it. Kalia took the cup, her fingers trembling, not from weakness, but from the suspicion gnawing at her. She drank, the cool liquid sliding down her throat, though the metallic taste made her grimace. She looked at him, searching for a sign, deception, ulterior motives, anything, but saw only a tired man, bearing scars she knew too well, as if they were both wreckage adrift in the same storm. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice softer, almost a whisper, as if the question was for the universe as much as for him. Ethan returned to his chair, picking up the data pad, his fingers tapping lightly on its scratched surface. "Just a drifter," he replied, his tone even, but his eyes flicked to the photograph on the wall, just for a moment, enough for Kalia to catch a glimpse of buried pain. "Used to be an engineer, now a cosmic scavenger. Picking up what's worth saving in this mess." He tapped harder, as if distracting himself. "You! Who wanted you dead so badly they locked you in that coffin?" Kalia didn't answer immediately. She gazed out the viewport, where Clithera 9's debris drifted, glinting like shattered memories. "The Galactic Council," she said at last, her voice bitter, the name a curse. "They don't like people who ask questions." Ethan let out a dry chuckle, the sound rough, not mocking, but as if he'd heard this story 100 times in the galaxy's dark corners. "They rarely do," he said, his eyes softening, no longer sharp, but tinged with empathy. "Rest. We'll talk more when you don't look like you're about to collapse." She wanted to protest, to dig into the stranger's secrets, the zero's symbol on his sleeve, the photograph on the wall. But her eyelids grew heavy, the stimulants and water easing her pain, if only slightly. Ethan's strange presence, undemanding, unjudging, pulled her into a dreamless sleep, the first since her exile, as if the darkness of the universe, for this one moment, had stopped its howling. The scout ship glided through Clithera 9's starfield, weaving past massive debris like a minnow among the corpses of whales. Radiation clouds, shimmering with ghostly green light, hissed like the laughter of trapped spirits, scraping the hull as if to drag the ship into the void. Kalia Vren, though still weak, was beginning to mend. Each breath was a small battle, each movement a declaration that she wasn't ready to fade. Her broken ribs still throbbed, but the pain was an old friend now, reminding her she was alive. Ethan Caldwell said little, but his presence was a constant, handing her water, checking her wounds with careful but unsentimental hands, or sitting in silence, fixing a device with the focus of someone used to patching broken things. He asked for nothing, demanded no gratitude, but his quiet resolve refused to let Kalia sink into despair, though she knew it better than anyone. One night, if the hazy cycles of space could be called night, the ship paused near a colossal asteroid, its gray surface pitted like the hide of an ancient beast. The engines hummed faintly, recharging from residual radiation. Kalia sat across from Ethan at a small metal table, the green light from the control panel casting sharp shadows across their faces. A box of recycled rations sat between them, the metallic tang of synthetic spices lingering in the air, a reminder of Kalia's long days on Solari warships, where everything tasted of machinery. She studied Ethan, her eyes tracing the scar on his temple, then settling on the patch on his sleeve, where the Zero's Alliance symbol stood clearer under the dim light, like a silent accusation. "You worked for them," she said, her voice cold, not a question, but a testing blade. Ethan didn't deny it. He set his spoon down, the clink small but sharp in the quiet cabin. "Yeah," he replied, his voice low, his gaze distant, as if peering into a memory he'd rather forget. "Engineer. Built shields, repaired fleets. I didn't pull the trigger, but I kept the guns firing." He paused, his fingers tapping lightly on the table, as if counting his sins. "I left when they ordered a Solari colony leveled. Civilians, not warriors. Women, children, people just trying to live. I couldn't do it anymore." Kalia clenched her fist, nails digging deep, leaving crescent marks in her palm. Memories of Tikra surged like a wave of fire, smoke rising, screams swallowed by plasma, the faces of children she couldn't save, though she tried. I fought Zeros, she said, her voice breaking, each word a cut. I saw what they did. Cities turned to ash. Children! She stopped, drawing a trembling breath, her silver eyes glinting not with anger, but with a pain she couldn't bury. And now you save me. Why should I trust you? Ethan leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers, unflinching, unapologetic. Don't trust me, he said, his voice blunt, like a man used to suspicion. Trust what I do. I'm not here to atone, Kalia. I'm here because leaving people behind isn't how I want to live. His words were simple, but carried the weight of a vow, plain but sincere. Her name on his lips startled her, like an arrow piercing her invisible armor. She hadn't told him her name, but he knew, perhaps from the escape pod's data, perhaps from the way he watched her, like an engineer analyzing a complex machine. Kalia studied him, searching for a lie, a fleeting glance, a false smile, but saw only a tired man, bearing scars she knew too well, scars of war, of guilt, of survival. What do you want? She asked, her voice low, almost a whisper, as if afraid the answer would break something fragile between them. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He stood, crossing to the viewport, gazing out at the starfield, where debris drifted like souls unable to find rest. I want to get you out of here, he said at last, his voice steady, his eyes unwavering as he turned back to her. Find a place the council can't touch, where Zeros is just a shadow. Then you decide your fate. His words promised no paradise, only a chance to live, to choose again. Silence returned, no longer heavy, but warmer, like an unspoken vow, like a small flame burning in the dark. Kalia looked at the cup of water before her, its surface reflecting light like a tiny star. She wanted to trust him, but the Zero's symbol on his sleeve lingered like a warning that compassion could be a trap. She opened her mouth to ask more, but a sharp beep sliced through the air, a blade tearing the stillness. Ethan sprang up, lunging to the control panel, his movements swift and precise, more warrior than engineer. The radar screen flashed, a single blip moving in an arc, like a wolf stalking in the dark. Hunter ship, he said, his voice taut, his eyes sharp again. Mid-grade cloaking, not military. Mercenaries. Kalia stood, pain in her chest shoved aside like a distant memory. They're tracking me, she said, her voice like steel. The council doesn't forgive traitors. Ethan yanked the controls, the ship veering past a massive debris chunk, engines screaming in defiance. What do you know about Solari hunter ships? He asked, hands steady on the panel, eyes glued to the radar. They use biosensors, Kalia replied, gripping the chair's torn padding, nails digging in. Locked onto my energy signature. If they found the escape pod, they won't stop. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from a familiar thrill, the thrill of a warrior ready to fight, as she had at Tikara, as she had always been. Then we outrun them, Ethan said, his voice hard, but his eyes flicked to her, just for a moment, as if to ensure she was still there, still with him against the dark. He launched decoy flares, sparks flaring in the void, scrambling the radar, but the blip on the screen clung close, nearer now, like a curse that couldn't be broken. Kalia stared out the viewport, her heart pounding, not from fear, but because she knew her war was far from over. The scout ship tore through Clithera 9's starfield, its tail spitting crimson sparks, engines roaring like a beast cornered. Massive debris flashed past the viewport, glinting like blades suspended in the void, ready to shred any careless intruder. The hunter ship trailed close, a shadow cloaked in darkness, revealed only by ghostly green bursts of plasma fire, each shot a silent threat. Kalia Vren stood beside Ethan Caldwell, her hands gripping the control panel, not from fear, for fear was something she'd left behind in the escape pod, but from a fire of resolve blazing in her chest. She had been ready to die once, but not today, not when she just found a reason to live. At this rate, the engines will burn out before we escape, Ethan said, his voice taut but steady, his hands dancing across the controls with an artist's precision. His eyes stayed glued to the radar, where the hunter ship's blip pulsed like a malevolent eye. Got a plan, or are we just flying until we blow up? Kalia drew a deep breath, her silver eyes gleaming under the faint light of the control panel. There's an abandoned maintenance station at coordinates 7 Alpha, she said, her voice cold, as if commanding a fleet rather than a battered scout ship. I used it during the war. If we reach it, I can disable their sensors. Ethan nodded, eyes never leaving the screen. Hold on. It's gonna get rough. He yanked the controls, the ship veering through a narrow gap between two debris chunks, metal scraping the hull with a screech like the wail of a forgotten soul. A plasma shot grazed them, shaking the cabin, red warning lights flashing like spilling blood. Kalia lunged to the auxiliary controls, her fingers flying across the keys in a war dance she knew by heart. She sent a pulse into the station's ancient systems, a relic from her days as a commander. An electromagnetic wave erupted, invisible but fierce, paralyzing the hunter ship's biosensors for a few precious seconds. Ethan seized the moment, plunging the ship into a dense cloud of stardust, its shimmering particles swallowing their radar signature, cloaking them in darkness. They sat there, breaths heavy, the cabin air thick with the smell of burnt metal and sweat. The control panel's light illuminated their faces, highlighting Ethan's sharp features and Kalia's unwavering silver gaze. She looked at him, and for the first time since her exile, a small, genuine smile curved her lips, like a star flaring in the dark. Not bad, she said, her voice light, laced with a hint of teasing, as if testing his reaction. Ethan let out a warm, dry laugh, the sound echoing in the quiet cabin. You're not bad yourself, Kalia Vren, he replied, his eyes flicking to her, not to judge, but to memorize this moment when they cheated death together. His smile caught her off guard, not because it was false, but because it was so real, like the smiles of warriors she'd led, laughing before their final battles. But the moment was fleeting, snuffed out like a flame in a cold wind. A sharp beep pierced the air, and the radar flared, revealing not one, but 3 new blips emerging from the darkness like starving wolves. Kalia shot to her feet, her eyes cold as sharpened steel. This isn't the council, she said, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with a dark memory rising from the depths. This is the Black Star Line. Solari's secret executioners. They don't just want me dead. They want to erase every trace that I ever existed. Ethan turned to her, his gaze hard, brows furrowing as if piecing together fragments of her story. Why are they hunting you this hard? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper, but heavy with the need for answers before plunging into the void. Kalia inhaled deeply, her breath shuddering, each word a stone she lifted from her chest. At Tikara, she began, her voice bitter. I didn't just retreat. I destroyed a Solari energy core before it could power a weapon of annihilation. It could have wiped out the entire belt, human colonies, Zero's fleets, all of them. Millions would have died, not warriors, but civilians, children, people who'd done nothing wrong. She paused, her eyes drifting to the viewport, where the starfield drifted silently. The council doesn't know I did it. They think I just betrayed them. But the Black Star Line knows. And they don't forgive. Ethan said nothing, but his gaze shifted, a deep respect mingled with concern, as if realizing she wasn't just a warrior, but someone who'd carried the weight of a galaxy on her shoulders. So they won't stop, he said, not a question, but a confirmation. No, Kalia replied, her voice like steel. Unless we stop them first. They had no time to think further. Ethan nodded, his hands tightening on the controls. All right. Where to? He steered the ship toward a dense cluster of asteroids, where spinning rocks formed a natural labyrinth, a battlefield carved by the universe for this fight. He navigated with uncanny precision, slipping through narrow gaps, the hull scraping stone with cries like mourning. Kalia, with a commander's tactical mind, anticipated the hunter ship's paths, her eyes scanning the radar, calculating angles and moments. The second ship will flank right, she said, her voice sharp. Cut it off at Gap 9 Beta. But the Black Star Line wasn't easily fooled. A hunter's ship materialized ahead, a phantom emerging from the void. Its plasma cannons fired, green light tearing the darkness, rocking the scout ship violently. The auxiliary controls sparked with a crack, showers of sparks flying. "Auxiliary engines are down!" Ethan shouted, his hands racing across the panel to stabilize the ship. "We can't outrun them anymore." Kalia stared into the darkness, her eyes unwavering, like a warrior facing fate. She turned to Ethan, her voice low but certain, like a vow. "Then we don't run. We fight." She pointed to the viewport, where the asteroid cluster spun like a maze of stone blades, glinting under the eerie glow of stardust. "That area," she said, her voice sharp as a freshly honed blade. "The rocks will hide us. I can set a trap." Ethan nodded, his eyes locked on the radar, where the 3 hunter ships' blips pulsed like the eyes of predators. He shoved the controls forward, the scout ship screaming as it plunged into the heart of the darkness, where massive fragments hung, ready to swallow both the hunted and the hunters. Behind them, green plasma light flared, like the curse of the Black Star Line, but Kalia smiled coldly, her fingers already gripping the mine launcher, like a warrior embracing her destiny. The scout ship shuddered, its hull screeching like a wounded beast as it grazed the jagged rocks of Clithera 9's asteroid cluster. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by fleeting glints of stardust, like lost souls seeking rest. The 3rd hunter ship, the Black Star Line's final shadow, clung close, its plasma cannons ripping through the void, each shot a reminder that Kalia Vren and Ethan Caldwell's time was running out. Kalia rushed to the weapons bay, a cramped corner cluttered with makeshift devices, the legacy of an engineer who never surrendered. Her eyes scanned the rusted metal boxes, sharp and focused, settling on a magnetic mine launcher, a crude weapon, but enough to disrupt a hunter ship's navigation. "This," she said, her voice like steel, "will give us a chance." Ethan, still at the controls, glanced over his shoulder. "You know how to use that?" He wasn't doubting, just confirming, his eyes flickering with a fragile trust. Kalia nodded, her hands already assembling the device, fingers moving with the precision of a warrior preparing for her final stand. They worked in tandem, Ethan weaving the ship through the asteroid cluster's narrow gaps, Kalia deploying mines in a tight choke point where the spinning rocks formed a deadly maze. "Too narrow," Ethan muttered, sweat beading on his brow. "But it's a good call." He guided the ship through a stone crevice, metal scraping rock with a howl like a trapped beast. As the hunter ship charged in, blinded by the arrogance of a predator, Kalia triggered the mines. A magnetic storm erupted, invisible but ferocious, shaking the void like a torn fabric. 2 hunter ships, caught off guard, lost control, spinning like leaves in a gale. They collided, metal screaming, and exploded into brilliant fragments, illuminating the starfield like a festival of destruction. Kalia gripped the chair, her breasts heavy, her eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. "2 down," she said, her voice low, like a warrior counting fallen foes. But the 3rd hunter ship persisted, undeterred by the trap. A sharp hacking signal blared from the control panel, red lights pulsing like flowing blood. Kalia realized, with a chill of dread, that this ship wasn't just hunting her. It carried a device capable of reactivating the Tikra energy core, a fragment of the weapon she thought she'd destroyed at the Tikra belt, a tool that could erase millions of lives. She dove into the engineering bay, where tangled cables hung like spiderwebs. There, among Ethan's scavenged relics from the starfield, she found an old Solari signal emitter, pulsing faintly with green light. It was a piece of the energy core, small, but enough for the Black Star Line to use as a key. "Why did you keep this?" Kalia shouted, her voice raw with anger and fear, her hand clutching the device as if to crush it. Her eyes blazed, as if Ethan had betrayed her from the start. Ethan, focused on the controls, answered without turning, his voice strained but unapologetic. "I didn't know what it was. I just collect what's sellable. I'm not your enemy, Kalia." A plasma shot from the hunter ship sent the scout ships spinning, cutting their argument short. Kalia stumbled against the wall, But her eyes didn't leave Ethan. The zeros symbol on his sleeve, the secret of the energy core, it all felt like a web ensnaring her. But there was no time for doubt. She seized the Solari device, her fingers racing across its controls, disabling its signal before the black star line could activate it. The green light died, like a snuffed flame. Ethan steadied the ship, but both knew time was slipping away. "We need an exit," he said, his voice hoarse, hands still gripping the controls. "There's an old comm station at Clithera-9's edge. If we make it, we can send a distress signal." Kalia nodded, but her eyes remained cold, like a blade poised to strike. "If you betray me, Ethan," she said, her voice low, each word a vow, "I'll kill you before the Black Star Line gets me." He met her gaze, unafraid, only a flicker of sadness crossing his face. "Fair enough," he replied, then pushed the ship through the starfield, dodging debris in the hunter ship's assaults. The comm station loomed in the darkness, a rusted metal structure, drifting like a forgotten wreck. They landed, sprinting inside, the air heavy with the stench of oil and burnt copper, like the breath of a dying machine. Dust-covered panels glowed faintly, a last spark of hope. Kalia and Ethan worked together, fingers flying across keys, activating the system, sending a distress signal to the exile belt, where survivor communities might hear. But in Kalia's heart, a question gnawed: could she trust Ethan, or was he just another fragment in the cosmic storm? The comm station trembled beneath Kalia and Ethan's feet, metal groaning like a warning from the past. The third hunter ship had caught up, but it didn't fire. Instead, it unleashed a swarm of combat drones, small machines glinting like metal insects, storming the station like a plague of death. Red light from their sensor eyes swept the corridors, each hum a threat. Kalia and Ethan retreated deeper into the station, racing through narrow halls where the air clung thick with oil and metallic dust. "They're hurting us," Kalia said, her voice sharp, her silver eyes glinting like blades. She gripped a broken metal rod, the only crude weapon she'd found, but in her hands, it became a tool of lethality. Kalia led the charge, her Solari warrior instincts igniting. She lunged at a drone, slamming the rod into its sensor, sparks flying. Another charge, but she spun, striking its power core with precision, the drone exploding in a white flash. Ethan, lacking combat skill, compensated with ingenuity. He tore open an old control panel, cables spilling like a machine's guts. "Hold them off!" he shouted, his hands racing, splicing wires to trigger an electromagnetic pulse. An invisible wave surged, crippling the remaining drones, their red eyes fading as they crashed to the floor. In the fleeting calm, Kalia turned to Ethan, her breath heavy, her eyes sharp as knives. She pointed to the scout ship in her mind, where the crooked photograph of a woman and child hung. "That picture," she said, her voice low, not an accusation, but a demand for truth. "Who are they?" Ethan froze, his hands still clutching wires, his gaze sinking, as if she touched a wound unhealed. "My wife. My daughter," he said, his voice rough, each word a stone lifted from his chest. "They were on the Solari colony zeros raised. I couldn't save them. That's why I left." He met her eyes, unflinching, as if willing her to see the pain he carried, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. Kalia stood stunned, her anger dissolving, replaced by a shared pain, like an invisible thread binding them. But there was no time to speak. A new signal blared from the station's control panel, cold as the Black Star Line's laughter. Kalia rushed to it, her fingers dancing across the keys, decoding the message. Her heart stopped as the truth emerged. The Tikara energy core wasn't just a weapon, it was a reality-warping device, capable of tearing apart Clithera-9 and spreading to the exile belt, erasing every survivor community struggling to rise from the ashes. "We have to destroy it," Kalia said, her voice resolute, a vow unbreakable. "Completely." Ethan nodded, but his eyes held a flicker of unease, like a man about to confess a sin. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I worked on that energy core. Not as a grunt. I was part of the core design team. I destroyed its data before leaving Zero's, but not fast enough. The Black Star Line got a piece. Kalia stared at him, the truth like a blade piercing her chest, cold and deep. You helped build the thing that could kill us all? Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with the sting of betrayal, though she hated admitting it. And I tried to stop it, Ethan said, his voice hoarse, his eyes locked on hers, not pleading, only needing her to understand. I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to believe I want to fix this. She didn't answer, but she stepped beside him, her fingers racing across the control panel, searching for the secret energy station the Black Star Line was using. They were no longer strangers, divided by Zeros and Solari, by guilt and doubt. They were two survivors, bearing the same scars, and now they had to face the darkness together, not for hope, but because there was no other choice. The comms station quaked one final time, metal groaning like a farewell as Kalia and Ethan sprinted from the smoke-filled corridor back to the scout ship. The radar screen flared, revealing the coordinates of the energy station, a metallic heart hidden deep within the starfield, pulsing with ghostly green light, a challenge from the Black Star Line. Kalia stood beside Ethan, her silver eyes cold as steel, her fingers still clutching the broken metal rod like a reminder of the battle just fought. We have to end it, she said, her voice low, each word a blade. Ethan nodded, his hands tightening on the controls, his gaze fixed on the screen, like a man ready to face the storm he'd once helped create. The ship roared, tearing through the darkness, plunging into the heart of Clithera 9, where their fate, and that of the Exile Belt, awaited. The scout ship shot into the core of Clithera 9's starfield, a spear piercing the void, its engines bellowing like a warrior's cry against destiny. Massive debris drifted, glinting with the eerie green glow of the Black Star Line's secret energy station, like the bones of a forgotten god. The third hunter ship, the enemy's last beast, clung close, its plasma cannons shredding the void, each shot a wordless curse. Kalia Vren manned the auxiliary controls, her fingers dancing across the keys, hacking into the station's Solari systems with the precision of a strategist who'd once led fleets. Ethan Caldwell, hands locked on the controls, dodged attacks with uncanny skill, his eyes sharp, like a man who'd made peace with death. The energy station loomed before the viewport, a colossal structure suspended among the wreckage, a metallic heart beating in the chest of darkness. Its core pulsed with green light, vibrating like the breath of a war machine designed to warp reality, to obliterate any target. Kalia felt its power, not just a weapon, but a threat that could swallow Clithera 9 and the Exile Belt. She hacked into its controls, her fingers weaving through code like a deadly dance, seeking to overload the core. Each command was a dagger thrust into the machine's heart, but it fought back, like a living thing aware of its impending death. An unexpected comms signal crackled, shattering her focus. A mocking, cold voice, familiar to Ethan, sliced through the channel, sharp as a blade. You were always weak, Ethan. Saving a Solari? You think you can atone? The voice carried a cruel smile, savoring every second of the pain it inflicted. Kalia glanced at Ethan, seeing him grip the controls until his knuckles whitened, his eyes blazing with a rare fury. Marcus, he said, his voice low, each word a bullet. Marcus Vell. Once my friend. Now the one behind it all. He offered no further explanation, but Kalia sensed the pain in his voice, a scar deeper than any she'd seen. Marcus laughed over the comms, the sound cold as metal on stone. Not just me, Ethan. The Black Star Line and Zeros have joined forces. This energy core will bend the galaxy to our will. And you'll die with that Solari in the very storm you helped create. His words were a blade, aimed not just at Ethan, but at the memories of what he'd been, what he'd done. Kalia didn't wait. She pressed on, sending sabotage commands into the station's systems, each line of code a step toward destroying the core. But Marcus was no easy foe. His hunter's ship unleashed a barrage of guided missiles, red sparks streaking like ravenous wolves. Ethan swerved through a narrow gap between debris, metal screaming as the hull scraped stone. A missile grazed them, tearing a gash in the ship, air hissing like a scream as oxygen bled out. The auxiliary panel sparked with a crack, but Kalia didn't falter, her eyes locked on the screen, a warrior refusing to yield. "We're running out of time," she said, her voice sharp, fingers still racing across the controls, sending the final commands to overload the core. "I can trigger the explosion, but we need a decoy to draw Marcus's ship into the station's core." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes resolute, no trace of hesitation, though he knew the cost. "I'll be the decoy," he said, his voice low, like a vow. "You finish the hack. Destroy that thing." Kalia shook her head, her eyes blazing, not with anger, but with fierce determination. "No," she said, her voice firm, like a commander rallying her troops. "We do this together. If we die as warriors, not as those who abandon each other." They devised a desperate plan, born of necessity and a budding trust. The scout ship would plunge into the energy station's core, where Kalia had set a chain reaction, luring Marcus's hunter ship into the maelstrom. Ethan piloted with the precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime fixing broken things, his eyes never leaving the radar. Kalia stood at the auxiliary controls, sending the final command to trigger the explosion, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what they were about to do, an act that could save or doom millions. Marcus's hunter ship clung close, its plasma fire relentless, each shot a curse to tear the scout ship apart. Ethan dodged, weaving through debris with a deadly grace, a dance among the stars. A shot grazed them, rocking the cabin, red warning lights pulsing like blood. Kalia gripped the chair, her eyes fixed on the screen, where the final codes ran, a countdown to apocalypse. "Almost there," she whispered, her voice low, like a prayer. The energy station loomed before them, its core trembling violently, green light flaring like a star about to die. Marcus was still there, his voice dripping with contempt over the comms. "You were never strong enough, Ethan. You'll fail, like always." But Ethan didn't respond, his eyes focused on the path ahead, on Kalia beside him, on their last chance to make things right. The scout ship dove into the station's core, a dagger plunged into the heart of darkness. Kalia pressed the final key, triggering the overload sequence. A high-pitched wail rang out, like the universe screaming before it shattered, and the core's green light erupted, swallowing everything in its storm. The scout ship plunged into the energy station's core, a lance piercing the heart of darkness. The core shuddered violently, its ghostly green light flaring, a star in its death throes. Kalia Vren stood at the auxiliary controls, her fingers racing across the keys, activating the overload sequence she'd meticulously set. Each line of code was a curse against the Black Star Line, a blade of vengeance for what they'd done, and a prayer for the lives she'd failed to save at Tikara. Ethan Caldwell, hands locked on the controls, kept the ship steady amidst the storm of metal and plasma, his eyes unwavering, like a man who'd accepted this might be his final moment. 3 seconds! Kalia shouted, her voice hoarse, her silver eyes glinting under the core's green glow. She pressed the final key, a piercing wail rising, like the universe's cry before shattering. The core trembled, its light exploding, engulfing everything in a tidal wave of fire and metal. Ethan acted swiftly, yanking Kalia from the controls, dragging her to a small escape pod at the ship's rear. "Go!" he yelled, his voice drowning out the engine's roar and the hiss of tearing air. He shoved her inside, sealed the hatch, and triggered the launch as the explosion began. The escape pod shot from the station, weaving through burning debris, a speck in a cosmic tempest. The shockwave rocked it violently, metal groaning like a lament. Marcus Vell's hunter ship, too slow to escape, was consumed in the radiant blaze, along with the energy core and the entire station. The green light flared, then faded, leaving a silent void, only glittering fragments like stars born from destruction. In the cramped escape pod, Kalia and Ethan sat close, their breaths heavy, sweat beading on their brows. The control panel's faint light illuminated their faces, highlighting Ethan's sharp features and Kalia's silver eyes, now softer. "We did it," Kalia said, her voice hoarse, almost disbelieving. She gazed out the viewport, where the station's fragments drifted, glinting like a tapestry of sacrifice. The energy core was gone, the threat to Clithera 9 and the exile belt extinguished, at least for now. Ethan took her hand, his fingers interlocking with hers, not for comfort, but as a vow that they'd survive together. Yeah, he said, his voice low, a tired smile breaking through. But I think we need a vacation. The scar on his temple crinkled, and his smile, though small, was the truest thing Kalia had seen since her exile. She laughed, a small, clear sound, like a stray note in the shattered starfield. It was her first laugh since the Council's judgment, since she'd lain awaiting death in the escape pod. Her laughter made Ethan look at her, his eyes softening, as if seeing a different Kalia, not the Solari warrior, not the traitor, but a survivor, like him. They said nothing more, only gazed out the viewport, where the fragments glittered, a reminder that this victory had its price. But Kalia knew, deep within, that the Black Star Line and Zeros wouldn't stop. Marcus Vel might be dead, but his alliance, a shadow greater than the energy station, lurked still, waiting in the dark. This was only a fleeting victory, a moment of peace before the next storm. She squeezed Ethan's hand, not from fear, but because she knew they need each other for what lay ahead. The escape pod drifted on, its weak engines humming like a whisper, heading toward the exile belt. The distress signal they'd sent from the comm station had been answered. A rescue fleet from survivor communities was en route, their beacons flickering in the distance, like lighthouses in the void. Kalia looked at Ethan, her eyes softer than ever, no longer sharp as blades, but warm, like a small star burning. "Thank you," she said, her voice low, not for saving her from the escape pod, not for fighting beside her, but for giving her a reason to keep going, to believe there was still something worth fighting for. Ethan smiled, a weary but genuine smile, his eyes locked on hers. "Thanks for not killing me," he said, his voice tinged with teasing, but his eyes said more, a respect, a connection they both felt, though either dared name it. They fell silent, but the silence was no longer heavy as it had been in their early days. It was warm, like an unspoken vow, a small flame burning in the dark of the starfield. The escape pod drifted, carrying 2 survivors, 2 souls once abandoned by the universe, now bound together in the light of their sacrifice. Through the viewport, distant stars glittered, a reminder that, whatever the Black Star Line or Zeros plotted, Kalia and Ethan would face it together, not because of fate, but because they chose to. Yet deep within, Kalia sensed a darkness still lurking, hidden in the galaxy's shadows. The energy core might be destroyed, but its secrets, and Ethan's, and her own, remained partially veiled. She looked at him, and though her heart yearned to trust, a small part of her wondered, would this light be enough to banish the darkness, or were they merely delaying a greater storm? The escape pod touched down on the exile belt, a cluster of space stations and small colonies floating in the galaxy's darkness, like islands of light in an endless ocean. Artificial suns glowed softly, illuminating pitted metal domes and lush gardens, where survivors of the galaxy's wars gathered, rebuilding from the ashes of the past. Kalia Vren and Ethan Caldwell stepped from the pod, their bodies scarred, wounds from Clithera 9, from battles and curses, but their hearts lighter than ever, as if the universe, for this moment, had ceased its howling. They weren't greeted as fugitives, burdened by past sins, but as heroes who'd quenched a fire that could have consumed the galaxy. A crowd gathered around the landing pad, faces weathered but eyes bright with hope. An older woman, her silver hair tied back, stepped forward, grasping Kalia's hand with the strength of one who'd survived 100 battles. "We heard your signal," she said, her voice low but warm. "Thank you for giving us a chance to live." Kalia only nodded, unaccustomed to gratitude, her eyes sweeping the crowd, children playing, workers repairing solar panels, families embracing under artificial light, and for the first time, she felt she belonged somewhere. That night, in an artificial garden, Kalia stood beside Ethan, gazing at a simulated sky where laser-drawn stars glittered like unbroken dreams. The surrounding trees glowed faintly, their leaves shimmering like jewels, exuding the scent of fresh earth and sweet blossoms, a luxury Kalia had never known in her years on Solari warships, where everything tasted of metal and ash. She held a cup of clean water, free of metallic tang, and sipped slowly, as if learning to savor life, drop by drop. The cool liquid slid down her throat, and she smiled, a small but genuine smile, like a star flaring in the dark. "I used to think peace was a lie," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper, her silver eyes glinting under the garden's dim light. "A story told to forget war. But standing here, I want to learn to live for it." Her words weren't a grand promise, but an acknowledgement, a door she opened for herself, after years imprisoned by guilt and blood. Ethan took her hand, his fingers interlocking with hers, not to claim, but to affirm they'd walked through darkness together. "We'll learn together," he said, his voice low, tinged with weariness but full of resolve. "Not because we deserve it, but because we can." The scar on his temple crinkled as he smiled, a smile that didn't hide the pain of his past, his wife, his daughter, those he couldn't save, but wasn't chained by it. Kalia turned to him, her eyes no longer sharp as blades, but gentle, like the light of glowing trees reflected on the small lake beside them. No grand vows, no sweeping declarations, only the silence of two souls crushed by the universe, who'd lain awaiting death in the dark, yet chose to rise. She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the calluses from years as an engineer, the battles he'd survived. It wasn't a confession of love, but a recognition that they were no longer alone, that amid scars and broken curses, they'd found each other. They sat by the lake, the glow of the trees rippling on the water, forming shimmering circles, like memories of a world untouched by war. Somewhere, children's laughter rang out, clear and carefree, a reminder that life endured. The soft, resilient songs of survivors blended with the whispers of a community rebuilding from ashes. Kalia leaned her head lightly on Ethan's shoulder, and for the first time since her exile, she felt no need to glance behind her, no need to search for hunter ships in the void. Here, in this small garden, she felt something close to peace, though she knew it was fragile as the light on the water. Ethan said nothing, only squeezed her hand gently, his eyes tracing the simulated sky, where artificial stars burned, not for war, but for stories yet untold. He thought of his wife and daughter, of days he'd believed he could save the galaxy, and of Kalia, who'd pulled him from the darkness, not with words, but with her defiance, her choice to fight when she had nothing left to lose. He leaned in, his cheek brushing her hair, its faint scent of burnt copper mingling with the garden's flowers, and he smiled, a smile needing no explanation. Beyond, the true stars burned, glinting through the exile belt's viewports, like flames that never died. Kalia knew the black star line and zeros lingered, hidden in the shadows, weaving new schemes. But now, she wasn't afraid. She'd faced death, guilt, herself, and survived. Beside Ethan, she felt a new strength, not a warrior's strength, but that of one who dared to hope, to believe light could exist in the galaxy's darkest corners. In this small garden, amid scars and broken curses, Kalia and Ethan began to write their own story, one of humanity, of defiance, of a love brighter than the stars. And as the community's songs rose, blending with the whisper of artificial winds, they knew that, whatever the future held, they'd face it together, not because of fate, but because they'd chosen this path.